We're going to start the third Chiluk of the Kovetz, Chiluk Gimel. These are three Sichos that speak about three different perspectives Yidden could have when they interact with HaTevah, when they interact with Tzarchei HaParnasa. In the previous two Chalakim, we spoke about how the existence of Yidden is higher than HaTevah. The existence of Yidden is in a miraculous way. It's an Eifin and Hagan Nisis. And we also spoke about in the second Chiluk how Yidden look at HaTevah, the view Yidden look at HaTevah. In this Chiluk, we're speaking about not so much how Yidden are higher than HaTevah, but more how when Yidden do interact with HaTevah, what is their perspective? So we're going to start with the first Sicha of this Chiluk. It's a Sicha from Pashas Beshalach, Chiluk Tes Zayin, where the Rebbe starts explaining the connection of the Mon to the mitzvah of Shabbos. The first time the Torah mentions the concept of Shabbos is when the Torah in Parshas Hamon, when the Torah speaks about Parshas Hamon. So there must be a connection between Mon and Shabbos. And that brings down from the Rasag that someone who's stuck in the middle of somewhere on Shabbos and he doesn't know which Parsha it is, then he should say Parshas Hamon, and because through Parshas Hamon he connects to the concept of Shabbos. So there must be a connection in the Mon itself that we see the concept of Shabbos in the Inyan Hamon. So that first starts explaining until Sivav what was the Mon. That the Mon was called Lechem and Hashemayim, which that resembles something which comes completely from the Eibishter, something which comes completely from Shemayim, and the Yidden had no part in bringing down that food that they should be able to eat it. That's Lechem and Hashemayim, as opposed to Lechem and הארץ. When we say that a person makes food from wheat, a person has to plant the wheat, and then a person has to cut the wheat, and eventually make it into bread. So when a person makes bread, he's relying on the laws of nature for him to make bread. He's relying that if he's going to plant a kernel into the ground, the laws of nature is going to make that they should grow, and so on and so forth. The more he goes, the procedure of making lechem, the procedure of making bread, is a natural process. That if a person works and does this and this pula, then eventually it's going to cause a effect for him to have bread. As opposed to Lechem Hashemayim doesn't have the interaction of the person. The person doesn't have to do anything for it to come. The Yidden didn't have to do anything for the Mon to be edible. And number two, that meant it had no connection to nature in any way. It wasn't a natural thing. It wasn't something the Yidden did, and as an outcome of the action came Mon. It was completely a miraculous thing that they woke up in the morning and they found Mon. That's what Lechem and Hashemayim was, and that's what Lechem and הארץ was. The difference between Mon and regular bread isn't only something which practically Yidden had to do or Yidden didn't have to do. They brought out these two concepts of regular bread, Lechem and הארץ, and Lechem and Hashemayim bring out two different aspects and two different connections the Yid has to the Eibishter. When we say Lechem and הארץ and we say that Yidden have to work for their food, it means that Yidden are relying on the laws of nature. Yidden are relying on that their food isn't coming from Shemayim. Their food has to come through a pu'ula. Their food has to come from a certain action that they do. Now, what is the definition of that action that a Yid does in order to make sure he has food on the table? What is the definition of what he does? In other words, what is the significance of that action? And how does a Yid supposed to look at that action? So in general, we know that it says in the Pasuk, that the way that the bracha of the Eibishter comes, the way the Eibishter benches Yidden with Parnasa is that Yid has to do something. Yid has to do something to bring his Parnasa. In other words, a Yid can't sit at home and wait till he has Mon and wait till something comes from the Shemayim. The Eibishter wanted that a Yid should work for his Parnasa. Yid should do something to bring his sustenance. So on the one hand, there's the bracha of the Eibishter, Barach Hashem Lekecha, that the person should know that his Parnasa comes from the Eibishter. It's a bracha. On the other hand, the Eibishter said b'chol asher ta'aseh, everything he does. That the bracha, the kli for the bracha, in other words, the lavush, the vessel, the recipient for the bracha that come through is in b'chol asher ta'aseh, whatever you do. That's going to bring the bracha. Over Mela, when he acts, so number one, when he goes and does his business, he has to know that the bracha is coming from the Eibishter. On the other hand, since the Eibishter said that a person should work for his bracha, and not that he should work, that the work is a kli for his bracha, that brings a natural reaction that the kli has some sort of tfitzas makom, the kli has some sort of chshivas. Just like the dogma, in a person has a koyach hariyah, a person has a koyach is able to see. Now, the koach that a person is able to see is not limited to the physical eye. The koach that a person is able to see is a general koach that doesn't even have to be connected to a physical aspect. Like it says in Gan Eden, that you didn't see a lakus, that they don't see it physically, but the concept of seeing exists even not to the physical object. Adrabah, dafka, when is a person able to see a physical object? When a person sees with the physical eye. So the nefesh is able to see. The nefesh has oid that has a koach hariyah. Now the koach hariyah doesn't have anything to do with seeing practically a physical object. When the nefesh comes into the guf, so the oid hanefesh or the koach hariyah now is mislabish and clothes itself into a physical eye. Now the physical eye that the Eibishter made is a kli for the koach hariyah. The physical eye that the Eibishter made is a levush for the koach hariyah. And it happens to be that the Eibishter made that kli should be connected to the koach hariyah. The eye is designed differently than the ear. So even though b'payal, everyone knows that when you see, a person doesn't see because he has eyes. And chas v'shalom, when a person passes away, he has physical eyes, he has the kelim, but he doesn't have the ear. He's not able to see because he doesn't have any chayis in the eyes. So everyone understands that the bracha, in other words, the mucker of being able to see, comes from the nefesh, comes from the fact that he's alive, and he has an neshama that is able to see. On the other hand, the kli for that koach is the physical eye, and if chas v'shalom the physical eye gets damaged, then he's not able to see, because even though the nefesh has the koach hariyah, on the other hand, his kelim are broken. So even though the mucker of being able to see comes from the nefesh, at the end of the day, the kelim have a big tzitzis makim. The kelim have a big chshivas. The eye, a person has to watch over his eye to make sure it's okay. That which the Eibishter said, that the bracha Hashem lekach b'chol she'taseh, even though on the one hand the Yid knows that the bracha comes from the Eibishter, in other words, the source of the parnasa comes from the Eibishter. On the other hand, the Eibishter wanted, and that's part of Kavanah Sabriya, we'll see soon, that the Eibishter wanted that a person should do make a kli, make a physical action to bring down that bracha. Make a physical action to bring down that bracha. And when a person does that physical action, then the bracha comes. So bracha Hashem lekach b'chol asher taseh, that the bracha is going to come through that action. Over Mela, on the one hand, the person knows that the action, the mucker, the source of the action, the source of the bracha comes from the Eibishter. On the other hand, practically, the action now gets its tzitzis makim. The action now gets a legitimacy that is the kli that's going to bring his bracha. Now, even though the legitimacy of the ma'aseh that he does, of bracha Hashem lekach b'chol asher taseh, isn't that it's legitimate mitzad atzmei, just like the eye, everyone understands the eye doesn't see mitzad itself. A dead person can't see. So the eye isn't chashuv, the eye isn't significant on his own right, because the eye is only a kli, the eye is only a physical kli for the koach hariyah. On the other hand, dafka through the eye you're able to see, and therefore the eye has some sort of significance, not mitzad atzmi, but mitzad that is a kli for the eir. Now there's in Tzarech HaPanaseh that bracha Hashem lekach b'chol asher taseh, ein echanami, the Eibishter decided that it should be b'chol asher taseh. And the Eibishter could have made it differently. The Eibishter could have made that a person, just like in a person's body, the Eibishter could have made that the koach hariyah should come through his ears. And the ears shouldn't have, and the ears don't have any connection to the koach hariyah. The ears aren't physical things that the koach hariyah is able to come into. But the Eibishter could do everything, and the Eibishter can make that the koach hariyah should come through there. But the Eibishter didn't do that. The Eibishter made that the koach hariyah should come through the eyes. Adar and Panasa, the Eibishter made that the bracha should come through a pula that the person does. And kaviyachal, that pula has to make sense. That pula has to be a kli for that bracha. So even though it's not a kli, it's not a davar chashuv mitzad atzmei, even though it doesn't become significant and legitimate mitzad atzmei, like the eye doesn't become significant mitzad atzmei. On the other hand, since the Eibishter decided this is how the Seder should work, since the Eibishter decided that the bracha Hashem lekach should come dafka through taseh, so now the taseh gets some sort of significance. The taseh gets a legitimacy. And that's what lechem and haaretz represents. Lechem and haaretz represents a person making a kli for the bracha of the Eibishter to come down. That's lechem and haaretz. As opposed to lechem and השמים. Lechem and השמים is the mon. The mon represented the concept that even though there is a seder of lechem and haaretz, but there's another whole different type of seder. There's another whole different type of way that the Eibishter deals with Yidden. And that is that there's no rules. And that is that Yidden don't have to make a kli for their bracha. And Echlami says, bracha Hashem lekach b'chol asher taseh. But that's all one type of avodah. That's all one type of way the Eibusha deals with the world, deals with Eden. There's another type of way the Eibusha deals with Eden is that there's lechem and השמים. Lechem and השמים, their bread comes from Shemayim, comes from heaven, which means that the Eibusha shows them in a revealed way that they could get food without having any action for them to bring that. And that's why one of the reasons the mom was given was to test Yidden to see that Yidden should keep the mitzvahs of the man and not leave any left over for the next day. That was the point of the man, even though it's a side note that Yidden shouldn't leave man left over for the next day. But that's the whole point of the man, to test the Yidden's emunah, or in other words, to show the Yidden's emunah that their parnasa isn't coming from them, the parnasa is coming from the Eibusha. At that time. And therefore, since the parnasa is coming from the Eibusha, there's no room for pula derech HaTevah. There's no room for an action that they should do to make sure they have for the next day. Because the parnasa, this is the seder now, then was that they should get the parnasa from the Shamayim, lechem and Shamayim. So that's the two concepts of the man and lechem and Haaretz. Now we see a very interesting thing. That even though the man represents a yid getting his parnasa completely higher than nature without having to do anything for it, we see that there still was an aspect in the man that had to do with a person's action. And that is that the man didn't come into the people's plates. The man came, even by tzaddikim, the man came to the opening of their house. By the Sham, they had to go further. But even by the big tzaddikim, the man came to the opening of the house. A tzaddik had to open his door and bring the man from his house, from the opening of his house into his house. Why can the Eibusha, if the Eibusha is making an S all the way, that there should come a lechem and a shamayim, a bread from shamayim, a bread from heaven, and each have no connection to the way it comes down, why can the Eibusha make that it should just come into their plates? So the answer is that the Eibusha want them to bring this perspective of having lechem and a shamayim also into lechem and It's also into their day-to-day lives, even in Eretz Yisrael, when they have to work for the actions. Let's see the beer inside in Sif Vav, page 68 of the Kovetz. The Rebbe says the beer on there. That in from man lechem and Shamayim is given a achana to the knisa from Eden Eretz Yisrael. That which the Eden got man in the desert wasn't only because Eden needed food practically, but it was also that the whole desert, the whole Deir Midbar was all a achana, was all a preparation to coming into Eretz Yisrael. What's the difference between Eretz Yisrael and the desert? Was dort is given that say the von lechem and Haaretz. So this concept of Yidden doing an action to have their parnasa, that was dafka in Eretz Yisrael. Why was the man achana? So how can the man be achana to Yidden going to Eretz Yisrael? They're two completely separate things. Vadavka durch dem, was man hat bewiesen, die Yidden begolling. Wie sie Parnas und Nistarchus wird gegeben nur von dem Eibusha allein. Davka, after the Eibusha showed the Yidden in a revealed way that everything that they had came from the Eibusha. Not that it was mislabish through a levush of teva, and not that they have to make his benus understand that even the work that they do comes from Shemayim. But lechem and Shemayim means that in a revealed way it was revealed how it came from the Eibusha. How does it so great und gegeben dem Koyach, also kommen die Eretz and Sheves. Und da reingehen, die zum Seder from lechem and Haaretz, that gave them the Koyach, that through going into Eretz Yisrael, through this being achana to go into Eretz Yisrael. And Eretz Yisrael, when they are going to have a connection to lechem and Haaretz, when they are going to have a connection to working and doing a pula, which HaTevah, that's going to bring their parnasa, soll man nicht vergessen, that should give koyach, and that should be able that a yid should change his perspective and realize that through, even though he's doing the pula of hanhagas HaTevah, even though he's doing the pula of making the kli that the ashba should come down, and we spoke about before them that the kli is connected to the ashba. Baruch Hashem l'kacha b'chol asher tasa. The tasa is taka a true weight of mamshech the ashba. That together, that he should know that his pull is only a pull which is mamshech the ashba, and it's not his Indian. It's coming from Huan Nisim Chaker Lasachel. So that's all how the mom was achana to Eretz Yisrael. That a person could work in teva and not realize it comes from the Eibusha. The first level of a person interacting with teva is that a person could connect to do a pula and think that it's Kovetz and Resources. And the reason why he thinks it's Kovetz and Resources because the Eibusha made a certain tnu in this world of which is called teva. And teva means is tuba b'yamsuf. It means that we don't see in a revealed way that it comes from Malakos. In a revealed way, we don't see how when you plant a kernel and it grows, that's coming from the Eibusha. Why? Because the Eibusha made certain rules that that certain rules that according to those rules, if you plant a seed in the ground, it's going to grow. And that's from Sheshim Bereshis, from the third day of Sheshim Bereshis. That's where the Eibishter created the world. So when a person, if he doesn't have his benus, if he doesn't have achane of lechem and shamayim, his perspective is that it's not it's not coming from the Eibishter. Even if you could say that the Eibishter decides, the Eibishter runs the world, the Eibishter made these rules, but once that the Eibishter made these rules, we don't see in a revealed way, at least, it's not a pshitis that it comes from the Eibishter. It comes, the man and gives achane, that when a Yid is in Eretz Neshavos and he is in Eretz Yisroel, and he has to work for lechem and haaretz, which lechem and haaretz, the pool is essential to bringing the bread onto the table, and we should have this perspective of lechem and shamayim. So that's all one inyan. That's all how a Yid should realize that teva really comes from the Eibishter. Now the Rebbe is going to say Nachmer, a whole different perspective. In Antona we were explaining how Yid should realize that teva is a likus. In Antona we were explaining how Yid should realize that really when he plants a kernel into the ground, the koach that for the kernel to grow is coming from the Eibishter. Or in the mashal that we spoke about before, about the koach re'iyah, that a person should realize that the koach re'iyah, that which a person sees, isn't coming from his eye physically being able to see, but it's coming from the nefesh, that the nefesh is making that the eye is able to see. That since the nefesh has a koach re'iyah, and the koach re'iyah affects that the eye is able to see. So without too much benunus, a person could think that a person has an eye, and the eye is able to see. If you ask a child why you're able to see, the child's going to say, because the person, you have eyes. But when a person looks into a deeper perspective, he starts realizing that the eyes mitzad atzma can't see. The eyes could see because they have a koach inside the eyes that can make them see. That the last chayil comes from the koach of the Eibishter. So that's all one perspective, that the teva comes from the Eibishter. Now we're going to say a whole different thing. Nachmer, we're going to say that not only does a Yid has to realize that the teva comes from the Eibishter, we're going to say, which connects to the past sichos that we learned, that a Yid in general isn't connected to teva in general. A Yid comes from Shem Havai, which Shem Havai is higher than teva. In other words, mitzad atzme, a Yid wouldn't have to plant a seed in order to get parnasa. A Yid is batzim shayich to lechem neshamayim. A Yid is batzim shayich to hanhagad nisis. A Yid is batzim shayich that the rules of the world, the way the world is supposed to run, don't apply to Yid. Why? Because a Yid is higher than the world, which means that a Yid doesn't relate to the terms of the world. The terms of the world means that if you plant a seed, it's supposed to grow. By Yid, there's no supposed to happen. Why by Yid is something not supposed to happen? Because the Yid is batzim higher than the world. Yid comes from Shem Havai. Like I spoke in the past sichos, that a Yid is connected to hanhagad nisis, which means that l'chatchila he doesn't need kelim. Or if in the mashal of the nefesh doesn't need eyes to see. The nefesh can see without beruchnius, without eyes. That which the nefesh needs eyes to see is in order to see in a physical way. The nefesh needs eyes to see, but the nefesh Gan Eden doesn't see. Is higher than the concept of being connected to boundaries of seeing. So Yidden are higher than the boundaries of Elam Hazah. Yidden are higher than the boundaries, the gvulim and the rules of Elam Hazah. So in Tona we explained how a Yid is supposed to realize that the gvulim of Elam Hazah come from the Eibishter. Now we're going to say another inyan. It says that Rabbi Nachmer on page 68, the second column. It's Vav. Nachmer, that lechem in hashamayim, that which the Yidden got, the lechem in hashamayim, that which the Yidden got, the mon, it need blezachone unesinas keach, is not only that the mon was an introduction, and the mon was there to give a keach to change the perspective of Yid after the Yid when Yidden went in Eretz Yisrael. So the Rebbe nor erved nimshach und nidgash eich in Eretz Neshavos. Yidden got the mon, and is felt in Eretz Yisrael, when they had to plant, they still had this concept of the mon. Why? Since Yidden are essentially higher than the world, higher than the boundaries of teva, the boundaries of nature, is that emes, as a feel of when they kumen up in Welt, even when a Yid neshama comes down into the world. And even when a Yid interacts with the world, a Yid connects to the world, a Yid goes into business and he's doing levush HaTevah, in Elam Hazah. Is there Seda Aveda from Eretz Neshavos? Is there in the Seda from Eretz Neshavos? The Yidden are working in Eretz Neshavos. Is there Hashpa Saparnasa Bamitis Uprimis nit verbunden mit die Darke HaTevah von Lechem Naretz? Since a Yid is Be'etzem higher in the world, Be'etzem he's not connecting to Elam Hazah. Their hashpah doesn't come from the boundaries of the world. Their hashpah doesn't come from the seder that the Eibishter created, that a person has to get the hashpah by doing an action, and that action shall lead to parnasa. That's all the way Teva is supposed to run. Teva, like we said before, has two nukudas. Number one, Teva has rules. Teva has a way that it's supposed to be. And number two, Teva has to come through an action of a person. In our context, that the person, levush HaTevah means that the person has to do the levush HaTevah in order for it to work. These concepts don't apply to a Yid. Be'etzem by Yid, he wouldn't have to go to work. Be'etzem, since a Yid comes to Shem Havaya, the whole concept that you need a plant in order for fruits to grow, don't apply to a Yid. Don't apply to a Yid. In other words, you go to the Mashal before, Be'etzem, mitzad the Kerech HaRiyah doesn't have to come down into the Gashmis. Kerech doesn't have to come into the kelim of Riyah. It doesn't have to come into the kelim of seeing physically. And that's where Yid gets his parnasa from. So the man wasn't only something which existed before Yid went into Eretz Yisrael, and it wasn't only an introduction to Eretz Yisrael. The man was basically to show a Yid, and not only when he does Teva, he should realize that Teva comes from the Eibishter, but even more so. That Ba'atzim is not shaykh to Teva. Ba'atzim, he doesn't have to connect to Teva in any way. Let's skip the brackets. Not as der lechem. The parnasa min haaretz, even this lachem, meaning the lachem min haaretz, the Yidden were in Eretz Yisrael, and they have to work for their bread, even that is an ha'efen from lachem min hashamayim. But says, it beheft nit gebunden midak HaTevah. Even when Yidden do act in the ha'efen of Teva, even when Yidden do act in the ha'efen of levush HaTevah, the levush HaTevah don't have a connection to the hashpah that he gets. A Yid's source is from somewhere else. And let's say the Eibishter would make that a person is able to see from his nose. Or that the Kerech HaRiyah isn't mislabish in the eyes, the Kerech HaRiyah isn't mislabish in the ears. Now, the Eibishter could do that. If the Eibishter does that, we'll see that there's no connection between the Kerech HaRiyah and the ears, because the ears aren't made in a physical way that they're able to see. So that would be an example of the ear being mislabish in the kli that's not the right kli. And the Eibishter could do that. Now, what would be the relationship of the ear to the Kerech HaRiyah if that happens? The ear is always going to know that he's not meant to see. It's only mitzad nes. The ear is going to know that the kerech that he has isn't his kerech. The kerech that he has is the kerech hariyah. It's shaykh to something else. And that was by Yidden. By Yidden, Ba'atzem, that which are being Isaac and levush HaTevah, that which have a connection to Teva, isn't to bring their hashpah. The hashpah comes from Shem Havaya. The hashpah comes from a different source of hashpah. That which a Yid does in Teva is for a whole different reason, like we'll see soon. But it's not to bring the hashpah. The hashpah doesn't come from there. And even when he does act in levush HaTevah, even when he does open up a business and does open up and bring lechem and Haaretz, that lechem and Haaretz is coming Ba'atzim from lechem and Hashamayim. That lechem and Haaretz is coming from a different source of an organisis. It's still a nes, and has no connection to the bullet that he did. So mitzad levush HaTevah, the way the Eibishter created the world, that there's a seder for the hashpah, which means that there's oiris and kelim, which means that the hashpah makes sense in kaviyachol. So if the hashpah makes sense, it makes sense that when you plant, it grows. That's the way the Eibishter set up the world, and even more so, that which a person plants is because the Eibishter decided that it's supposed to be that way. And since the Eibishter decided that it's supposed to be that way, so on the other hand, the Eibishter decided that it should have a certain rhythm, it should have a way of working. And it comes dafka through the person doing that pula. So the person that can't take credit for it, but the person, there is a tfisa smakim to the pula, because the Eibishter said that it should work that way. So that's all mitzat teva. That teva itself is a lakuz, but at the end of the day, the Eibishter gave in the sinas makim for these rules. Then comes the second union that we just mentioned now, that when Yidden are acting in levush HaTevah, those levush HaTevah betan don't have a connection to the hashpah that they're getting. The hashpah comes from a different makkah. The hashpah comes from a whole different source. The hashpah is coming from an organisis, from a different makkah. There is no way that it's supposed to run by Yidden. The question is, why taka dini teva? If you're doing levush HaTevah because that's the way the Eibishter decided to find. But over here, there's no connection between the pula that you're doing and the hashpah that you're getting. Lo Yitzur, the Eibishter will make a nes. The Eibishter will tell Yidden that if they say Yehi Eitz, or they say that there should be a tree, that the tree is going to grow. So he didn't have to say that he ate. But that message that they're going to say has no connection to the tree growing. He's going to understand it has no connection to the tree growing. And that was the Levush HaTevah. The Levush HaTevah have no connection to what a Yid is doing. So the question is, why do they have to do Tevah? What is the point in a Yid doing a pula that doesn't bring the Amshach that he's doing? So for that, there's an explanation of Chassidus. We're going to see it soon. That the Eibishter wanted to pick up the Tevah, and the Tevah should be affected also by the Sanagonissus. We'll see in a second. But the Hashpah doesn't come from that pula. So now we have, what comes out of it, we have two inyanim. We have the man, which is lechem and השמים, which lechem and השמים signifies how a Yid is completely hanagonissus. A Yid has nothing to do with Tevah. A Yid woke up in the morning and he had bread in front of him. And then you have lechem and הארץ, which means hanagas HaTevah, which means the Yid is working. Barach Hashem lekachem b'chol hashatas. Yid is working for his parnasa. That's a second inyan. And then we have a third inyan. We have a third chiddush, that by a Yid, his lechem min haaretz, by a Yid, his pula that he does for his bread, is really lechem min hashamayim. Really has nothing to do with the pula that he's doing. Now, the Rebbe is going to say now that this concept that the lechem min haaretz really is lechem min hashamayim, in a way is much higher than the man itself. Meaning the effect that the man had on Yidden after they go into Eretz Yisrael was a much higher inyan than the man was itself. Why? Und das ist der Emes Shleimus HaBitachin von Yidden in the Eibishter. This because they brought out the Shleimus HaBitachin that Yidden trust in the Eibishter. Nicht nur in a Fall, wenn es zet nicht kein Eizich in der HaTevah zu bekommen Parnasse. Merely have a case that a Yid doesn't see any way, any Levush HaTevah. He doesn't see in a natural way, have a way for him to have Parnasse. Over Mendel is Kilo kein Brei Nita und verlässt sich von Eibishter, so werden, es besorgen sein Parnasse bei von Nissi. In the midbar, when Yidden had the man, so the man, the betachin Yidden had in the Eibishter regarding the man was a complete betachin. Why was it a complete betachin? Because they didn't have anything else. They didn't have any other source of income. They didn't have any other source of levush HaTevah or source of anything to eat. So they were forced to believe in the Eibishter. In other words, they were forced to believe and connect to this hanagonissus. So that's one level. That when he doesn't have any kelim in Teva, he connects to the hanagonissus. But then there's a new level, a second level. Now, I feel of an emacht yakli in Teva. The chiddush is that even when Yidden came into Eretz Yisrael and they did make a kli in Teva, they did connect to Teva. Why? That's what the Eibishter said. He's doing because that's what the Eibishter said. But he had a connection to Teva. So even when he's there, is by abgelegt as sein parnasse is bikara lechem neshamayim. A Yid knows that his parnasa, this action that he's doing, ba'atzem is lechem neshamayim. Nid gebunden midak HaTevah, and doesn't have a connection to natural occurrences. Und as die Aftache von Brach Hashem lekach b'chol asher tase, made nit blaze as das was der Eibishter benchtem is be'erach zu dem medida v'agbola von der Kli tase, was hat zugerät, and it comes out of nafmin b'pel, that a Yid believes not that the hashpah that he's getting isn't limited according to the action that he did. A feel of season of Eifin bracha v'atzlacha. That he ain't nechalami. There's one Eifin that the Eibishter benches, the Eibishter benches through the tasa brings the bracha. But that's all the fierach the tasa. That's all connected to the pula that he did. Here we're speaking a different inyan. Now it says bein areich as the kli is nitevis makim. That the bracha that he gets out of that, the bracha if he has this Eifin of bitachin, the bracha that he gets has no connection to the pula that he's doing. It's bein areich to the pula that he's doing. Just like a person would say that a tree should grow and apples will come. The hatzlacha that comes out is bein areich to what he did, because what he did, there is no significance in what he did. The significance of what he did was because that's what the Eibishter said, and that's it. And the Rebbe finishes off in Siv Zayin that's why the man had to have even though the man was lechem neshamayim, but the man had to have a concept of Yidden working for it, because the man had to have this inyan that mitzad echad is lechem neshamayim. On the other hand, it still connects to the pull of the person. That the pull of the person, that's what brings lechem neshamayim. The pull of the person, that's what brings the anhaga, which is completely not connected to the pull of the person. So what comes out of the first sikha is that there's two levels of Yid looking at Teva. So even before then, you have a way that a person can look at Teva, and he doesn't see anything to do with the Eibishter. A Yid opens up a business and he's successful, and he doesn't give any thanks or credit to the Eibishter, because by him Teva is completely concealed. So that's the lowest level, which we didn't even mention over here. Then you have a higher Ofen. The higher Ofen is that the Eibishter decided that a Yid should get the bracha through Teva. That the Eibishter decided that in order for a Yid to be successful, he has to go to work. Adam the Lashon is that a person shouldn't stay at home doing nothing. The Eibishter decided that a person should go to work and have a nagas HaTevah. Now, even though the bracha is from the Eibishter, on the other hand, since the Eibishter decided that the bracha should come through this action, and in Teva's terms, this action brings the bracha. And according to this, that if a person stays home, if a person stays home, the bracha kaviyach is not going to come. Because the bracha comes through tasa, so the Nagas HaTevah, even though they don't have a legitimacy and a significance mitzad atzmam, but since they're the kelim for the eir, so they get a legitimacy mitzad the eir, mitzad the bracha. Aderech, that the eyes in a person are, since they are kelim to the keich re'iyah, so it's very important that the eyes should be complete, and there shouldn't be any mum in the eyes, because even though the keich comes from the nefesh, if there's going to be a problem with the eyes, then the keich not going to be able to express itself. The bracha is not going to come if there's no levush HaTevah. So levush HaTevah aren't important mitzad atzmam. They're important because the Eibishter decided that a Yid should work with them. But they still get a significance. So that's one level. That's all the way it's mitzad velt. That's all the way it's mitzad teva. And then you have a higher level. The way it's mitzad a Yid's perspective. A Yid's perspective is that a Yid that's is higher than teva. A Yid comes to Shem Havaya. Shem Havaya is higher than teva, which means that Shem Havaya doesn't relate to the rules of the world. Since Shem Havaya doesn't relate to the rules of the world, there is no way that the world is supposed to run. The world runs according to the way the Eibishter wants it to run at any given moment. There is no rules that the sun has to rise in a certain direction, and there is no rules that if you plant, it's going to grow. These rules don't exist. The same way the rule is if you plant, it's going to grow, the rule could be that if you speak, it's going to grow. Mitzat Shem Havaya, there is no difference in the pull that a person does. And that's where Yid comes from. So Ba'atzim a Yid doesn't have to have any connection to Teva. Ba'atzim mitzad Shem Havaya, Yid Kataka sit in his house, and a nes will come. He'll get mon every single day. He'll get somehow the Eibishter will make a nes, and he'll have panasa. But the Eibishter wanted that a Yid should have a connection to Teva, which we didn't mention in the Sikha why so much over here. But the Eibishter wanted that a Yid should have a connection to Teva, and even though Ba'atzim he doesn't need Teva, but he should have a connection to Teva. Now these two levels aren't only two ways a Yid looks at Teva, but they have practical implications in a practical difference in the way a Yid deals with Teva. Like the Rebbe explains in the next Sicha, which is Sicha Zayin in the Kovetz, that these two Ifan and the way a Yid looks at Teva aren't only two different perspectives, but they also have a practical difference. The mitzvah, the first way a Yid looks at Teva, that he's making a kli for the Eibishter's bracha. So since this kli has some sort of tfisas makim, since this kli has some sort of significance mitzad atzmei, so when he does do the levush HaTevah, he's basically going out of the world of Torah mitzvahs. He's basically going out of the world of Torah and Tefillah, and his levush HaTevah have some sort of significance outside the realm of Torah mitzvahs. And therefore there could be a contradiction between davening and going to business. For example, a person could be davening, and if he's going to be ma'arich in davening, it might affect how his business is going to look like the rest of the day. He's going to make less contacts. Or a person is going to give a lot of tzedakah, it might affect his business. So even if a person is going to overcome his nefesh bahamis and overcome his yetzer hara and do the right thing and give more tzedakah, because at the end of the day, Teva also comes from the Eibishter, but it's still a fight by him. It's still two different worlds. There's two different things going on over here. You have the world of Teva, and then you have the world of Torah mitzvahs. And the world of Torah mitzvahs overcame the world of Teva. But at the end of the day, Teva also has a tfisas makim. And that's with understanding that Teva comes from the Eibishter. That's why he's doing the right thing. But there's still a back and forth of what he should do. As opposed to if a person being eising levush HaTevah has nothing to do with it, with his ashba, a person being eising Teva has nothing to do with the outcome of his business, so then there's no shakatay b'chlal. The whole concept doesn't start. His business there is no connection between his business and what comes and the ashba that comes down. So giving tzedakah has no way of affecting his business, because his business is intermediate to do the Eibishter's ratzah. He's only being Geisig in Teva because the Eibishter wants. So the mitzvahs are understood to each other. Now that I have a mitzvah, get mitzvah. And therefore, there's no shak v'tayr by him of what he should do. So that's the way these two inyanim play out the pale. And from that we get on to the third sikh of this chelik, Sicha Ches in the Kovetz, which is a sikh from Chelik Lamates Pashi Kisave, where the Rebbe starts explaining a third Ofen, a third way a Yid can look at Teva. The Rebbe starts bringing down the Gemara Masechet that says that there's three keys that the Eibishter keeps for himself and doesn't give to a shliach. One of them is the key for rain. Maftech shel gshamim. Then the Gemara continues, but in Marava they say that even maftech of parnasa, the Eibishter doesn't give away. And the Rebbe starts explaining what is the discussion if maftech shel parnasa is one of the keys that the Eibishter gives away to a shliach or not. And the Rebbe starts explaining on page 89 of the Kovetz, Siv Dalit. The Rebbe starts explaining the difference between the maftech shel parnasa and the maftech shel gshamim. That the parnasa and gshamim are two different things, two different ways the Eibishter gives sustenance to Yid, which means that there are two different perspectives a Yid has on parnasa. Let's see inside page 89, the bottom of the first column. The Mendel explains regarding rain that one of the reasons the Eibishter gave rain, one of the reasons the Eibishter made rain, the Eibishter could have given, we spoke about before, the Eibishter has a lot of different ways of giving parnasa to a Yid. Why did the Eibishter make that the nature is that there should be water that comes from Shamayim, and that water should water the plants? Why did the Eibishter make it that way? So the Mendel explains, one of the reasons that is that everyone should be dependent and everyone should look up to Shamayim when the rain comes. That which the Eibishter made, that a Yid's parnasa, a person's parnasa should depend on rain, that rain therefore comes from Shamayim. Rain doesn't come from the ground. Rain comes from Shamayim. That through the Eibishter making that the Nivraim down here should rely on something which comes l'mayla, should have an aspect that they're not in control of, should have an aspect that comes from Shamayim. That's there to instill in the Nivraim, to instill in creation that a Nivra doesn't feel its makar, a Nivra doesn't feel its source, but through the concept of kshamim, through the concept of rain, it represents that a Yid's chayis and a Yid's being comes from Shamayim, comes from the Eibishter. Let's skip the brackets for a minute. This could explain, now we explain what rain is, we can explain the difference between kshamim and parnasa. That which the Eibishter never gave over, the key of kshamim for shliach, even though kshamim, rain is associated with parnasa, rain is associated with sustenance. Pirusha, what does it mean? It means is shebemesh kol parnasas ha'adam hiach v'rak makadosh baruch hu. Really, the whole concept of parnasa, the whole concept of the Yid sustenance only comes from the Eibishter. In a way that the Eibishter gives parnasa in a way that, for a Yid, in a way that there's nothing else that could bring a Yid's parnasa. V'gam leilu levushi HaTevah she'adam eiseh kadei shal yodam yuchol lekabel parnasas mekadosh baruch hu. Even the physical actions that a person does, and he does them, we'll see soon that the Eibishter told him to do them, those physical actions have nothing to do with the hashpah that come down. If the pull a person does has nothing to do with the hashpah that comes down, why does the person go to work? And why does the Eibishter command that a person should go to work? Why is the concept of that there's a concept of tasa, a person has to do something? Why does a person have to do that? The reason why a person does it, because that's what the Eibishter wants. Before he gets to a reason why, but the perspective a person has on parnasa is that's what the Eibishter wants. Just like the Eibishter asked to keep kosher, and the Eibishter asked to light them in the Beis Hamikdash, and then the Eibishter asked to do parah aduma, even though it doesn't make any sense. The Eibishter also asks a person should go to work. So that's a mistake. There's no connection between the work that he does and the hashpah that comes down. Ve'edzes, and even more so. And not only the Eibush is not dependent on any levush HaTevah, ve'edzes leis, u'vat sh'adam yedea she'etzem hashpah rak mamayla, birchas Hashem yitashe. Not only a person has to look at his parnas as a kli, as a vessel to Makabal Eibish's brachas. Aderech kli Hashem and the Nes Elisha. Shekol inyan mayirak lahachil Hashem and Nisi. Just like by the story of Elisha. That Elisha said, Kelim nekim atamiti. That it's not pshad that the Kelim, through the Isha Shonam has brought more Kelim, so that was a mocker for the bracha. The bracha was Elisha gave a bracha that the more Kelim you bring, Kelim nekim atamiti. It wasn't a natural thing. On the other hand, the more Kelim she brought, the more bracha there was. Because the Kelim were a Kelim for the bracha. So that's one way for looking at Parnasa. That Parnasa is a kli for the Eibish's bracha, like we mentioned before. Eliyasel Akin, even more so, Shagam HaKelim, Ein Lem Chshivus Afilu B'tur Kelim. Ulevushim L'Achar B'Chs Hashem. There's a higher aspect, there's a higher perspective that a person looks at Parnasa, or a person doesn't look at the Kelim to begin with. The Kelim don't even have a Chshivus of Kelim. So why does a person work? A person works because that's the Eibush decided. The kli HaTevah, the levush HaTevah that the person does, are completely the have no connection to the bracha of the Eibush. Because the bracha of the Eibush has nothing to do with Teva, has nothing to do with nature. So that's the two we mentioned before and the Sichos before. Now the Rebbe goes a step further. This aspect of looking down at levush HaTevah, that levush HaTevah have no connection to the hashpah that comes, could bring in a person two different perspectives, two different ways of dealing with Teva. Either a person could say that since Teva is something that has no connection to a Yid, and a Yid is higher than Teva, so if so, Ba'atzem, he's not shaykh to Teva. Ba'atzem, everything, what he's doing, his pulling business, has no chshivus, has no connection to the hashpah that comes down. So it's almost as if he's doing a chayk which completely has no connection to him. That's one eifin. Aleph, Maise Adam, Ulevush HaTevah, Ein Lem Chshivus Klal. That the action a person does has no chshivus. It's al derech the Eibishter would say that if a person learns Torah, a person sitting and learning, then the more he learns, the tree is going to grow. Without him planting it. That the Maise that he's doing has no connection to the pull that's coming out of it. The kashem shemonogin nisis needed v'nigel b'pel shechuk HaTevah ein lem mitzias klal. Just like when the Eibishter makes a miracle, the definition of a miracle means that it breaks the gedarim of Teva. That he sees how the laws of nature aren't Tevis Makim. The laws of nature don't have a significance. The same thing when the hashpah of the Eibishter comes to Teva, it's almost like a miracle. Just like the one that came from Shamayim, like we explained in the last Sikha. So that's one if we mentioned last Sikha. Here the Rebbe is going to say Bey is a different word. The Rebbe is going to say that even though mitzad the person, Teva isn't Tevis Makim, the concept of Teva doesn't have a significance in front of him. But since the Eibishter asked him that even though Teva has no significance, that he should still connect to Teva, that's for Kavanah, that's for a purpose. And mitzad that purpose, the Eibishter wants him to find something in Teva that he's not going to find if he didn't have a connection to Teva. Let's see base. Even though the action that the person doesn't have any significance, like we said before, because the person knows that his hashpah comes from l'maylim and HaTevah. Since the Eibishter commanded that he should have a connection to Teva, that itself makes that he does indulge in Teva. Why? Because dafka through Teva, shal yodem miskayim ritzeni yizbarech. Dafka through Teva, that's something he's going to find, he's going to be able to makam the ratzon the Eibishter with. B'sinyan acher. Ha'emuna shaloi hi bevados gmura shakol bara rak me'akadosh baruch hu. A Yid believes completely in the Eibishter that everything comes from the Eibishter. Uva Mela, and since everything comes from the Eibishter, Harehu b'bitachin gamur b'akadosh baruch hu shu yitin lehakel miyodei amlei apsucha akdosh v'arachava. That the Eibishter is going to give him everything. Part of believing in the Eibishter means that a Yid believes the Eibishter is going to give him everything. Which means even if a Yid sits at home and is not working, he still has a munah. The Eibishter is going to provide him everything he has, like we said before. Because the Hanhaga Nisis, the Eibishter, just like the Eibishter gave man, everything, any ashpa that goes to the Yid is like man. This concept itself, that together with a Yid being completely higher than Teva, a Yid being completely disassociated with the laws of nature, together with that, the Eibishter said he should still act with the laws of nature. That itself, there's a reason why the Eibishter wanted him to be there. Even though Ba'atzim he has no shaykhs to it, because he's higher than Teva, but at the end of the day, the Eibishter said he should have a connection to Teva. So the connection, the Yid that's with Teva, is not in order that he should have parnasa, it's for a whole different purpose. The Eibishter wanted the Yid to know that the nature itself, the laws of nature itself, without having any association to his ashpa, the laws of nature themselves, that they're there that a person should recognize the Eibishter through the laws of nature. Not that a person should realize how when a person does the laws of nature, so that's going to bring him his ashpa. His ashpa doesn't come from the laws of nature. So when he is dealing with nature, he's dealing with something that has no connection to him. What's he doing over there? He's doing over there that the Eibishter wanted him to find the Eibishter in Teva. So the one Eifin is that a person is mevatel Teva. A person doesn't connect anything got to do with Teva because he's higher than Teva. And anything that he does have to do with Teva is only ba'karche kilu. It's only against his will because he's ba'atzim not shaykh to it. Then there's another Eifin. Another Eifin is that even though ba'atzim mitzad the ashpa is not shaykh to it, but mitzad the kavanah the Eibishter put him there, he is shaykh to it. That itself now becomes the mission that he's supposed to do right now, is deal with Hanhagas HaTevah and find the Eibishter in Teva. And that itself gives Teva chshivas, not because of the ashpa he's going to get from it. The ashpa comes from somewhere else. He's there in Teva to deal with Teva itself, that he should find the Eibishter through Darkei HaTevah. And through this, the Rebbe explains that this is the argument of, this is machlekes, whether the Eibishter gave the kiyar parnasa to shliach or not. These are the two sides, whether the Eibishter gave the key of parnasa to shliach or not. According to Rabbi Yechanan, kshamim nami hainu parnasa. According to Rabbi Yechanan, parnasa and kshamim, we say rain and parnasa means the same thing. The rain is the source of Eden's sustenance. Why? Any action a person does to bring his sustenance, to bring parnasa, they don't have a legitimacy, they don't have a significance. What is a person's parnasa? Rain. Like I mentioned before, that the rain is there that a person should realize that his parnasa comes from the Eibishter. Anything that a person does to bring his parnasa, they're all a detail in the way the Eibishter decided that his parnasa should come. Nothing to do with him. So that's a Bechan's opinion. Marava says that there's a separate key of parnasa. That parnasa, which in the beginning of the Sichos I mentioned, that parnasa means the levush HaTevah that a person does to bring his parnasa, that's there for a reason. And this is negeh that a person should know. That what? That a person shouldn't be mevatel Teva. That Teva is something that doesn't have legitimacy. Adrabah, it does have legitimacy. This is one of the ways that the Eibishter reveals himself to the world, dafka through Hanhagas HaTevah. And that's what he is doing in the world of Teva. And that's the connection he has to Teva. That Teva is another way to find the Eibishter. Teva is another way to see, like Chassidus brings down in Morav Masacha, Magol Masacha. Teva is another way to find another aspect of Elikus. Chassidus a lot of times explains that there's two connections he has to the Eibishter. There's an Eifin that he connects to the Eibishter in a way of bittul, that he submits himself to the Eibishter. And then you have in a way that he is ma'achel himself to the Eibishter. A Yid becomes connected with the Eibishter in a way that they're one. Which is in general the difference between Torah and mitzvahs. That when a person does mitzvahs are there, that a person should submit himself to the Eibishter through Kabbalah Seil. Even though a mitzvah is tzavsa v'chibur. Mitzvah means the Yid is connecting himself to the Eibishter. But the tzir, the image that he is connecting himself to the Eibishter through a mitzvah is that he's doing what the Eibishter wants, and it's not negea if he understands or he doesn't understand. That's mitzvahs. Then you have Torah, which the meaning of Torah is that a person's brain should be miyuchad with the Eibishter. Like HaTevah says in Tanya, that when the Yid learns Torah, he becomes connected to the Eibishter in a way, not that he's submitting himself, but that his brain, kameshahu, is connecting to the Eibishter with complete unity. Now, these two levels of either being mevat himself to the Eibishter, or being miyuchad with the Eibishter, which in general also the difference between banim lamakim, which is a son of a father who is connected to his father, as opposed to a eved, the connection an eved has to his master is that he submits himself to his master, which in general is also the meaning of ava and ava and yira. Ava means you're coming close to the Eibishter, and yira is mitzad richuk, that a person is far from the Eibishter. So these two tnuas of being bottled to the Eibishter and being connected to the Eibishter are two levels in Achdos Hashem. They're two levels in the way Likkutei connects to the world, or the way the world is connected to Likkutei. The first Eifin is how the world connects to Likkutei. In other words, how does the Nivra connect to the Eibishter? A Nivra has to know that his whole being comes from the Eibishter. And he doesn't have any tfisas makom, he doesn't have any legitimacy and significance mitzad atzmei. And the only reason why he's here is like HaTevah said in Sheikh the Munah, the only reason why he's here is because the Eibishter is being mechaim every single second. And the only mitzias that exists is the Eibishter's mitzias. He doesn't exist. He doesn't. The role that he plays in this world is that he's bottled the Eibishter. That's how a Nivra looks at Likkutei. How a Nivra looks at Likkutei is that he's there to be bottled the Eibishter. He doesn't have any significance with the Atzmi. How does a Likkutei look at a Nivra? The way a Likkutei looks at a Nivra, a Likkutei doesn't look at a Nivra as something which is separating from a Likkutei. A Likkutei looks at every part of the Nivra to bring out a different aspect of a Likkutei. The head is there to bring out one aspect of a Likkutei, and the hand is there to bring in another aspect of a Likkutei. There is no Metzias of the world mitzad atzmam, but the whole Metzias of the world is the Likkutei. So he's not being shale the Metzias of the world. He's using a Likkutei looks at the world's Metzias that it's a Likkutei. The hand is there to put on film. And the head is there to think, to learn Torah and serve the Eibishter in that way. That's why they were created. So it's not just that Yid loses his significance. It's not just that Yid becomes bottled to the Eibishter. Being bottled to the Eibishter means that you're not a Metzias. A higher Eifin is that you are a Metzias, but a Metzias of a Likkutei. And that's what we're talking about over here. One Eifin is that a Yid deals with Teva. A Yid's higher than Teva. When Yid connects to Welt, when Yid connects to the world, he feels uncomfortable. He doesn't have a connection to the world. That's because the world is bottled. The world doesn't have any tfisas makom. The world doesn't exist. Then you have another Eifin that the world does exist, and the fact that the Eibishter put him in a makom in Luvush HaTevah, he's there to bring a Likkutei into that place. And like Rebbe finished up the Sicha, that this is the difference between the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, the Aved of the Baal Shem Tov was to bring out the concept of Eino Movade, that the world is completely bottled to the Eibishter. How did Baal Shem Tov do that? Through being Magala, the Nakuda of Amunah, that should take over a person's being, that should take over a person's mitzias, that a person should basically lose the significance of the different Ivarim that a person has, that his whole mitzias becomes a mitzias that connects to the Eibishter and Eifin of Amunah. That was because the Baal Shem Tov is Magala, a level of a Likkutei, that's shadel the world, that makes the world bottled to Likkutei. The Alter Rebbe was Machadish Chassidus Chabad. Chassidus Chabad means that the world isn't a stira to Likkutei. The world is here to bring out Likkutei, and that's here. The reason why a person has a brain is that a person's brain should connect to the Eibishter in Eifin of Chabad. And through a person using his Chabad to bring out Likkutei, that brings out a tzir of a Likkutei that wouldn't have been brought out if he didn't use his brain. So every aver of the body is there to connect to the Eibishter in a different way. So the Ivarim aren't a stira to Likkutei, they bring out a Likkutei. So even though mitzad Eibishter, mitzad the Likkutei is higher than Pratim, and the way Likkutei is higher than Welt, the brain isn't Tevis Makim. But mitzad the Kavana Sabriya, the brain is Tevis Makim. Mitzad the Kavana Sabriya, the brain is there to bring out Likkutei in a different way that the feet are there to bring out Likkutei. And that was the Chiddush of the Rebbe. So what we said over here was basically three in Yonim, how three ways how you didn't look at Teva. The first definition is that the lowest level is that Yid connects to Teva in a way that the Teva is a kli for his bracha. That even though he knows the bracha Hashem lekecha, that the bracha comes from the Eibishter, at the end of the day, the Eibishter said to make kelim. Just like by Elisha told the Isha Shunamis to bring kelim, and kelim make him altamiti. The more kelim she brought, the more bracha there's going to be. So the pool of Sateva has some sort of connection to the Ashbah that comes. That's the lowest level. Then we said the higher level is that Yid realizes that he's higher than Teva to begin with. And the whole concept of Teva doesn't relate to him. A Yid comes to Shem Havai with Shem Havai's and Organisis, and the pool that doesn't Teva has no connection to the Ashbah that's going to come to him. And anything that he doesn't Teva is Kaviyach, he's uncomfortable with, because Teva is not Teva's Makameh. He's higher than Teva. He doesn't understand what he's doing in the world of Teva. That's the second Eifin. The third Eifin is that even though Mitzad Atzma Yid is higher than Teva, and Yid should feel uncomfortable with Teva, but on the other hand, the Eibishter put him in Teva. The Eibishter said that he should still, together with his milas, he should still connect to Teva, and that's there for a reason. That's there for a purpose, to bring in the Achdus of the Eibishter even in Teva. And therefore, mitzad that, a Yid does give a chshivus to Teva. Not mitzad he wants to give a chshivus to Teva, mitzad that the Eibishter give a chshivus to Teva. It's there to bring it out of Lakus in a different way than Hanaganisis. So that's a three Afanim. Next year we're going to focus on the last Chiluk of the Kovetz, which is Chiluk Daled, which speaks about how Torah mitzvahs have to be done to Levush HaTevah, which is a continuation of Chiluk Gimel. Chiluk Daled is going to speak about that not only Yid has to work in Teva, but Torah mitzvahs also have to be done with Teva, which is another prat in the Sugya.